I died and stood before Jesus, and he showed me the sin that is dragging millions of Christians to hell every hour. It's not the sins you imagine, not the most visible vices, not the lack of prayer or fasting. It's something much more common, hidden, and that many of us carry without realizing it. My name is Samantha Lee. I'm 43 years old, and all my life I've believed I was a true Christian, ready to enter heaven when the time came. One night, after years of living the routine of church, ministry, and family, my heart suddenly stopped beating. My husband would later tell me that I was gone for 12 minutes, lifeless, with machines sounding alarms and paramedics working desperately. But for me, time itself cracked open. I felt the heaviness of my body vanish, like a garment I could no longer wear. My ears still caught the faint echo of my husband's cry, but soon even that melted away, and I was no longer bound to the room, nor to the clock that had measured my days for 43 years. Shock is too simple a word for what I experienced. Imagine the sound of your own breathing cut off, yet you still remain alive in another form. Imagine floating above the bed where your body lies pale, and realizing you are fully conscious, more awake than you've ever been. My senses expanded, colors deeper, silence sharper, presence undeniable. I could not move in the way I used to, yet I felt myself carried by something unseen. The air itself seemed alive. Each second felt endless, each blink like a lifetime, and yet, I knew only 12 minutes had passed on Earth. You don't think about eternity until it's right before you. I remember an awareness rushing over me. I am not dreaming. This is not anesthesia. This is not my imagination. My soul has crossed a threshold. Behind me lay the world of calendars, arguments, bills, and schedules. Ahead of me was a realm where nothing could be hidden, where excuses evaporated like mist. I felt stripped of every mask, every pretense. It was terrifying and holy all at once. At first, I panicked. Would I come back? Would I see my children again? But even these thoughts faded as I realized that I was being drawn, pulled like a current carries a leaf downriver. There was no fighting it, no choice of direction. I was going to meet someone. The air throbbed with his presence even before I saw him. My shock deepened into trembling anticipation. My body on earth was without heartbeat for 12 minutes. But my soul was more alive in that space than all the decades I had walked in flesh. Every second of those 12 minutes is etched in me like fire on stone. And it was only the beginning. I felt it before I saw him. The atmosphere changed from heavy silence to a weight of holiness, pressing on every part of me. It wasn't oppressive. It was like standing in a storm of light and knowing that every atom in your being is seen. The current that carried me slowed, and suddenly there he was. Jesus, not as I had imagined from paintings or Sunday school illustrations, but as blazing majesty. His presence filled everything, and yet he was before me, close enough that my soul could feel his gaze. His eyes pierced through me. They weren't simply looking at me, they were looking into me. Every memory, every word, every hidden thought I had ever carried lay open before him. I couldn't hide. I couldn't pretend. My years of ministry, my reputation, my image of the faithful Christian woman, all of it was stripped away with a single glance. I was undone. I trembled, not with ordinary fear, but with awe so deep it burned through me. The very core of who I was shook. I wanted to fall, to hide, to cover myself, but there was no covering. His light was everywhere, filling the very air with truth. And yet, within the searing gaze, there was also love. It wasn't the soft love we imagine on earth. It was fierce, holy, unrelenting. The kind of love that refuses to let lies live. When he spoke my name, Samantha, it wasn't sound, it was essence. Each syllable carried eternity, and I knew in that instant that he knew me completely. My instinct was to explain myself. I thought of my decades of service in the church, the women's groups I led, the Bible studies I taught, the retreats I organized. I wanted to say, Lord, look at all I did for you. But before I could even form the words, he revealed the truth. Every excuse I might have offered crumbled to dust. I realized none of my works could cover what my heart really was. The awe I felt was mixed with dread because I knew, deep inside, something was wrong. My religiosity, my outward image, my long resume of Christian activity, none of it could stand in the presence of his holiness. His eyes told me everything. that my soul carried shadows I had refused to face. His gaze was the mirror that finally shattered the illusion I had lived in for years. The tidbit I can never forget. His eyes carried eternity, and in a single look, my entire life was revealed for what it truly was. I wanted to defend myself. The instinct rose in me like a tide to speak, to justify, to remind Jesus of all the times I had served him faithfully. But before my lips could form a word, he showed me the layers beneath my outward life. It was like watching the skin of my years peel back, exposing the cracks that had always been there but that I had carefully hidden. I saw myself in the pulpit room, smiling, organizing women's retreats, raising my children in the faith. Yet behind those smiles, in the quiet of my heart, a darker truth lingered. Bitterness, resentment, unforgiveness. It felt humiliating. All those years, I thought I was secure, a woman of faith others could look up to. I believed my name was written in the book of life, etched there without question. But Jesus revealed how I had been deceived. My works, my services, my sacrifices, they were the masks I wore to hide what I didn't want to admit. In that moment, shame washed over me like a burning flood. My identity as a true Christian collapsed. The strange thing is, I had always suspected there were cracks. Sometimes, late at night after leading Bible study, I'd feel a hollowness, a nagging whisper asking if my faith was truly alive. But I silenced it with busyness, more service, more prayer groups, more public devotion. I thought if I filled every corner of my life with ministry, the hollowness would disappear. Instead, it grew. Standing before Jesus, I realized those cracks had been gaping wounds all along. He didn't accuse me with words. The truth itself accused me. My religiosity was exposed as self-deception. Forgiveness, the very command I had preached, had been the one command I consistently refused to obey. My yes to service masked a hidden no in my heart. The emotion that consumed me was humiliation, holy humiliation, the kind that strips you bare until you have no illusions left. And the tidbit carved into me forever. Religiosity without forgiveness is deception. It may impress people, but before Jesus, it has no weight. Then the first wound surfaced, the one I thought I had buried under years of ministry. I saw Rachel's face, my closest friend who had once held my secrets like treasures. I had trusted her during the weakest moments of my marriage, shared with her the fragile prayers of my heart, but she betrayed that trust, disguising gossip as prayer requests, and my shame became church currency. Standing before Jesus, I felt that betrayal all over again, the sting of it like fresh fire. I told myself long ago that I had forgiven her. I stayed cordial, hugged her in church, even worked side by side in ministry. To everyone else, we looked reconciled. But Jesus showed me what he had seen all along, a hidden bitterness curling like smoke in the corners of my soul. My smile was a mask. My polite words were an act. Deep down, I had never released her from the debt I held against her. And as Jesus revealed this, the truth hit me harder than Rachel's betrayal ever did. I had built an entire theology of forgiveness in my teaching, yet my heart had been locked against it. I realized that I had been living a double life, one life on the surface, where I preached mercy, and another inside, where resentment festered. The pain of that exposure was crushing. My chest ached as if the bitterness itself were pressing down. I saw how bitterness had shaped me in ways I hadn't noticed, how it made me cautious, guarded, distrustful, how it colored every new relationship with suspicion. And there, before the one who forgave me of all, I stood with hands still clutching debts against another. The emotion was hurt from Rachel, but deeper hurt from myself, for choosing to cling to the wound. And the tidbit that burned itself into me, bitterness can hide beneath polite smiles, but before Jesus, it is naked and undeniable. No sooner had Rachel's betrayal been laid bare than another wound rose from the depths of memory, sharper, heavier, almost unbearable. It was my brother, Mark. I saw him as a boy, restless and reckless, always searching for shortcuts in life. Then the memory shifted the day we discovered he had stolen $15,000 from our parents' retirement. My father, in his 70s, putting on an apron at a supermarket to work again. My mother, crying behind closed doors, carrying the humiliation like a private coffin. And me, their daughter, seething with rage that boiled hotter than words could express. Before Jesus, I felt that rage as if it had never cooled. I remembered how I had tried to be Christian about it. I forced a smile at family gatherings, invited Mark to lunches, even helped him find a job. But beneath the gestures, my heart was a battlefield. Each time he spoke casually, as if nothing had happened, I screamed inside. And when I sought counsel, Pastor Williams had said gently, "Forgive him, he's your brother." I had nodded politely, but inside my fury multiplied. Standing in that holy presence, I realized the truth. My prayers had been poisoned by my unforgiveness. Each time I knelt, bitterness whispered louder than my petitions. My Bible readings were veiled by rage. My worship was fractured. I thought I was pouring out devotion, but in reality, every word was stained with a heart that refused to release. The weight of that revelation was crushing. My resentment toward Mark wasn't just against him, it had turned into resentment against God. I had asked 1,000 times, "Why would you allow him to hurt us and still expect me to forgive?" And in that refusal, my prayers became hollow echoes. The emotion that swallowed me was rage, frozen rage, rage that had disguised itself as righteousness, and the tidbit seared into my spirit. Unforgiveness blinds prayer. You think you are praying, but you are only circling the walls of your own bitterness. From the shadows of my brother's betrayal, another wound emerged, one that cut even deeper because it came from my own blood, my own child. I saw Emily, my daughter, once small enough to curl in my arms during bedtime prayers, now standing in the rebellion of her youth. I watched again the nights she defied curfews, the friends who pulled her away from everything David and I had tried to teach, and the moment that shattered me, discovering she had gone alone to a clinic, barely 16, making choices I had begged God to protect her from. Before Jesus, every detail replayed in merciless clarity. The arguments, the slammed doors, the cold silences that stretched for weeks. I saw myself smiling at church, while inside I smoldered with anger and disappointment. I realized that what had seemed like discipline was often bitterness, dressed up as parenting. I had judged her not only as a mother but as a wounded woman who felt betrayed by her own flesh and blood. The grief was overwhelming. My chest heaved with sobs that belonged to years I had suppressed. I thought of the nights I lay awake, repeating prayers for her salvation. But in truth, those prayers had been tangled with resentment. I didn't only want God to save her, I wanted him to vindicate me, to prove that my parenting hadn't failed. My unforgiveness toward Emily had not just divided us, it had turned my motherhood into a stage where pride performed instead of love. Jesus showed me the quiet destruction this had caused. I saw how Emily's eyes hardened every time she felt my silent judgment, how she pulled further away because she sensed the unspoken wall between us. The wound I thought was hers was also mine. I hadn't only lost connection with my daughter, I had allowed unforgiveness to corrode the bond God himself entrusted to me. The emotion flooding me was grief deep, parental grief mixed with shame. And the tidbit carved into my memory: unforgiveness can destroy family bonds more violently than any argument ever could. The scenes of Rachel, Mark, and Emily dissolved into something far greater and far more terrifying. Suddenly, I was no longer looking at only my story, I was looking at the church itself. Jesus lifted my gaze, and before me stretched a multitude, countless Christians from every background. I saw them lifting their hands in worship, preaching from pulpits, singing in choirs, serving in missions. They looked like the very people I had lived among all my life, faithful, active, devoted. But then, as though a veil was torn, the ground beneath them shifted. Without warning, a great chasm opened, and they began to fall into a darkness so deep that no sound could measure it. There was no fire, no screams, only a silence more terrifying than any torment I had ever imagined. It was the silence of absence, the absence of God. I watched with horror, as familiar faces were swallowed by that void. They were not criminals or unbelievers. They were churchgoers, leaders, missionaries, mothers, fathers. And Jesus' words cut through the vision like lightning, because they never forgave. Those 4 words struck harder than thunder. My knees buckled under the weight of them. I realized that what had chained me resentment toward Rachel, Mark, and Emily was also chaining millions. We believed our prayers, fasting, tithes, and ministries could cover the hardness of our hearts. But here, in the presence of holiness, that hardness condemned us. I tried to argue in my spirit, surely grace covers weakness. But Jesus made me understand in an instant. Unforgiveness is not weakness, it is rebellion. It is choosing pride over obedience. It is spiritual law: those who do not forgive are not forgiven. The simplicity of it was devastating. Just as gravity pulls a body downward, unforgiveness drags the soul away from God. Horror flooded me, not only for myself but for the countless others I watched slipping into eternal separation. And the tidbit that etched itself forever in me: unforgiveness is not a feeling to wrestle with, it is a law. Those who refuse to forgive will not be forgiven. In the middle of the vision, the multitude fading into the void, Jesus turned his eyes back to me. His gaze carried both fire and tenderness, and I knew the moment had come where no mask, no excuse, no delay could protect me. His voice filled the atmosphere without sound, more like thunder rolling through my soul. Are you willing to release the debts you carry? Are you willing to forgive Rachel, Mark, and Emily completely? The weight of his question nearly crushed me. Each name he spoke was like a stone pressing on my chest. Rachel, who had betrayed my confidence. Mark, who had stolen my parents' future. Emily, who had wounded me as a daughter. These names were chains I had dragged for years, and suddenly I realized that to let them go would feel like letting part of myself die. Because resentment had become my identity, I was the betrayed friend, the wronged sister, the disappointed mother. Without those stories, who was I? I wanted to say yes immediately, but the truth inside me recoiled. Part of me still wanted them to feel what I had felt, to taste the pain they had caused. And Jesus, who knew my thoughts before I spoke them, showed me a series of living scenes. I saw a mother embracing the drunk driver who killed her child, offering him forgiveness inside a prison cell. I saw a pastor ruined by lies, kneeling to pray blessings over those who defamed him. I saw a woman rebuilding her life after her husband's betrayal, choosing freedom instead of bitterness. These images pierced me like arrows, each one shattering the fortress of pride I had built. I realized forgiveness was not a feeling, it was obedience. It wasn't about minimizing pain, but about releasing it into his hands. Forgiveness was not weakness, it was liberation. It was an act of faith, trusting that God himself would handle justice while I chose love. Tears poured from me like rivers. In that moment, surrender became my only option. My voice broke into silence. Lord, I want to forgive. Help me let go. The emotion that flooded me was surrender, raw, trembling, freeing, and the tidbit etched into me forever. Forgiveness is liberation, not weakness. As soon as the words of surrender left my heart, the vision shifted again. The darkness of the falling multitude receded, and Jesus' presence grew even stronger. His eyes, though still burning with truth, now softened, with something I can only describe as commission. He said to me, not in sound, but in essence, that my story was not ending here. I did not bring you to condemn, but to send. A wave of responsibility swept over me. I had just seen how unforgiveness was dragging countless believers into eternal loss. I had just felt the chains of my own bitterness crushing me. And now he was telling me I must return, that my 12 minutes in eternity were not only about my salvation, but about warning his people. My heart trembled. I wanted to stay in his presence forever, but he made it clear. Many are in danger, and they do not know it. Time is short. You must speak. I thought of the ridicule I might face. Would people call me dramatic, fanatical, even delusional? I wondered if pastors would shut their pulpits to me, if friends would whisper behind my back. Fear crept in, but it was quickly silenced by the gravity of his command. This wasn't about me being liked or understood. It was about obedience. He reminded me, some will listen, some will not, but the message must be spoken. Then he showed me what could happen if I obeyed. I saw families reconciling after decades of silence. I saw husbands and wives weeping in each other's arms, as forgiveness replaced bitterness. I saw pastors laying down pride and publicly repenting to their congregations. The fruit of forgiveness was restoration, healing, revival. It was like watching chains shatter in every direction. But I also saw the opposite, those who would hear but harden themselves further, clutching their grudges as if they were treasures, their hearts closed, their eternity sealed. And Jesus reminded me, your task is not to convince, your task is to warn. The emotion that overtook me was responsibility, heavy but holy, a mantle I could not refuse, and the tidbit seared into me. Some will listen, others will reject, but the truth must still be told. Then, like a sudden pull of gravity, I felt myself being drawn back. The holy place began to blur. his blazing form fading into a softer glow. My spirit clung to his presence, but I knew he was sending me back with a mission. The next moment, I opened my eyes to the sterile brightness of a hospital room. Machines beeping, my husband weeping at my side. Doctors whispered of miracles, baffled that I was conscious after 12 minutes without a heartbeat. But I knew the truth. I had stood before Jesus, and I had been given another chance. The weight of his words clung to me as I began to recover. I couldn't waste time. My first task was to face the ones whose names had chained me for so long. I called Rachel. My hands shook as I asked her to meet me at the same cafe, where we had once shared laughter. When she arrived, I confessed the bitterness I had carried for 15 years. Tears filled her eyes as she admitted her own regret. We embraced, and for the first time, the chains broke. Then I faced Mark. I looked into my brother's weary eyes and said the words I had withheld for years. "I forgive you," he crumbled, confessing his shame and pain. And for the first time in decades, we were brother and sister again. The hardest came with Emily. Sitting across from my daughter, I admitted that my anger had disguised itself as disappointment and judgment. I told her I was proud of her, that I loved her without conditions. She wept, confessing that she had always felt I secretly rejected her. In that embrace, I felt heaven touch earth. As I began to share my story, people reacted in different ways. Some resisted, accusing me of exaggerating. Others were shaken to their core, realizing they too carried hidden grudges. In small gatherings, women confessed bitterness. Families reconciled in tears. Even pastors admitted from pulpits the grudges they had carried. The fruit was undeniable. Forgiveness was life, unforgiveness was death. The emotion that now defined me was freedom. Freedom I had never tasted before. And the tidbit that continues to guide my everyday. Unforgiveness is death, but forgiveness is life. I speak to you now, not as someone with a perfect past, but as someone rescued from the edge of eternal loss. My 12 minutes without a heartbeat were more real than all my years of church activity. I had lived as a faithful servant in the eyes of others, but before Jesus, I was a prisoner of unforgiveness. And if his mercy had not pulled me back, I would have been lost forever. So I plead with you. Examine your heart. Look beyond the hymns you sing, the sermons you hear, the ministries you serve in. Ask yourself one question. Have you truly forgiven? Not just in words, not just in public smiles, but in the hidden corners of your soul. Because Jesus showed me, with a clarity that burns still inside me, there is no salvation without forgiveness. Unforgiveness is not weakness, it is rebellion. It is choosing your pain over his command, your pride over his grace. And it is sending millions to eternal separation every hour. But forgiveness, true forgiveness, is freedom. It is not forgetting, it is releasing. It is not excusing sin, it is surrendering judgment to God. It is not weakness, but the greatest victory a soul can walk in. If you are listening to these words, know this. It is not too late. You still have breath. You still have choice. You still have the chance to forgive and be forgiven. Do not let another day harden your heart. Release the debts you carry before they drag you into the darkness I saw. If these words resonate with you, leave an amen in the comments, subscribe to the channel, and share it with at least 3 friends or family members right now. Now is your time to make a difference. Spreading this message is not only an act of love, but also a mission that Jesus himself has entrusted to you.